So there we all were. Me in floods of tears. Mum, unusual for her, letting Dad do all the talking. Dad shouting, not talking. And the psychiatrist, well, she was the joker in the pack. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Lesbianism sort of crept up on me unawares. When I was 13, the family moved to a different part of the country, and I moved to an all-girls school halfway through the year. When the deputy head took me to my class, I thought she'd taken me into the wrong year. They all had tights on, and I was wearing long white socks. And they all spoke posh and educated, like the news on the telly. This was 1972, so the telly wasn't exactly very diverse in those days. They were all Panorama, and I was Coronation Street. I had no idea until then that I dressed and spoke differently. So my first outing was as an outsider, a rural northerner. Laura was the only one who was friendly to me, and I snuggled into her attention. She was affectionate, and I came from a family that didn't do all that touchy-feely kind of stuff, so I lapped it up. We continued to be friends for the next couple of years, and I honestly can't remember when I came out to myself. For me, it was a normal, natural progression of affectionate friendship, although I suppose Sex in the Fields did mark it out as something different. Being outed at school was much more dramatic. We didn't know the teachers were watching us. Miss Denton saw us at the back of the class one rainy lunchtime and called us to the headmistress. I vociferously protested all the way to the office, shouting loudly for anyone to hear. How dare she suggest that there was something wrong with me? I had a 15-year-old's confidence, maybe arrogance, in the knowledge that adults, especially teachers, were idiots. The headmistress wanted an explanation. She didn't get one. So on the Friday afternoon, she contacted my parents. That's when my arsey facade crumbled. It was the worst weekend of my life. Actually, second worst, but that's another story. I was terrified of what would happen when my parents found out. Denial was my shield. They'd been called to a meeting at the school on Monday and with no explanation. So I said I had no idea what the meeting was for. The one person I could have turned to for support was denied to me. In those days, a phone was a big red box on the corner, not an instant message machine. So I had no easy way to rendezvous with Laura. Anyway, my parents were watching me like a hawk. We pitched up on the Monday afternoon after school had finished for the meeting with the headmistress, and she told my mum and dad that I'd been partaking in unnatural activities. Actually, I can't remember what she said because I was crying all the time. What I do remember is that my parents were angry and I was forbidden by everyone from seeing Laura in school and out. Next stop was the school doctor. She was useless. She was like a frightened rabbit, and anyway, she was Yasmin's mum, so there was no way I was going to be taking her seriously. So then the shrink. But I guess we had to wait a bit for these doctor's appointments because life settled into some kind of new normal. Laura and I were banned from seeing one another, but all that meant was that we got cannier and more deceptive. Faced with this crisis, I guess we found our own way to deal with it. And then there was Miss Dickinson, the games mistress. I was useless at games, but Laura was a sports star, captain of the hockey team, fastest runner, brilliant at netball, blah, blah, blah. So when Miss Dickinson came up to me one lunchtime, I had no idea what was coming next. I know you're not on the hockey team, Karen, but if you want to come to hockey practice, I'll tell everyone that you are. Well, I wasn't going to miss out on that opportunity. But the day of the shrink finally arrived. So, as I said, there we all were. Me, floods of tears, Mum letting Dad do all the talking, Dad shouting. I told Dr. Lindsay I would talk to her, but only on my own. I wouldn't say anything in front of my parents. So she sent them out into another room, and it all just flooded out of me. I loved Laura. It wasn't just about sex. I loved her in so many ways. Just doing things together, silly things or unimportant things or fun things or quiet things, just snuggling up. It was all so normal and natural. After a while, Mum and Dad came back in, and he was still cross. I guess looking back on it now, he was frightened. You see, he worked in a prison, and so he knew homosexuality, and to his mind, it was very ugly. But this is where the shrink became the joker in the pack, the trickster, the orchestrator of the unexpected turn of events. There's nothing wrong with your daughter, she told my dad. If she wants to be homosexual or heterosexual, then that's okay. There's plenty of happy homosexuals around, and unhappy heterosexuals I could have pointed out. But I didn't need to. A person in authority had stood up to my dad, and she was on my side. What I was feeling and doing was okay. I can't actually remember what I felt at the time, but whenever I've retold this story, and I've retold it many times, it was gobsmackingly good. My story is dedicated to two awesome women. Miss Dickinson, I didn't appreciate at the time how much you put your job on the line to stand up for what was right. And Dr. Lindsay, you listened and you agreed with me. You were on my side. Both of you gave me the confidence to be thereafter out. Thank you.
Karen, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And honestly, what a wonderful pair of women. I mean, they're just phenomenal, especially that games mistress, really, as you say, risking her life, or risking her job, I beg your pardon. I love that term, that you were engaging in unnatural activities.
Oh, I made that up. I can't remember what she said at all.
Probably worse than that. Karen, I just want to remind those who know, Karen was doing her PhD here in Belfast, and she came along to 10x9. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karen. And you dedicated a chapter of your PhD, well, you based a chapter of your PhD on 10x9, which was wonderfully flattering and also very revelatory when I actually got to read it, because I thought, oh my goodness, is that what we do?
Mm-hmm. So very good.
Thank you very much. How do you think it's changed since you were last here? How do you think Zoom has changed it?
The Zoom thing has made it very different. So it's very strange telling a story into quietness, you know, because obviously at 10x9, you've not only got the sound of people, you've got the feeling of the people, and I write a lot about that in the chapter, that you get this really sense of being in a supportive community at 10x9. It's lovely.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think you still get a sense of the supportiveness from the looking around the audience. Maybe I can see more people than you can, but watching the reaction on people's faces is it's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much, and apologies, I'd forgotten you were up in Edinburgh.
That's all right.
Lovely to see you again. Yeah. Now, I would just like to, just before we get to our next story, I'd just like to, it's an interesting phenomenon, Karen. I wonder if this might be of interest to you. We find that in the black box, we tend to get slightly more men come forward with stories than women. But since we moved to Zoom, we've definitely had many more women. So I think that's an interesting, but I am no anthropologist, so I can't explain it. So maybe somebody else